In 3, 2, 1. This is Acting Mastery. I'm Ben Matthews. If there was one guest I've wanted to have on this show since the beginning, it's Gregory Berger. Founder of Berg Studios in Los Angeles, Berg, as he's affectionately known, is not only a highly acclaimed acting coach to several Oscar, Emmy, and Golden Globe winning actors, but he was also my acting coach when I lived in LA. Being in Berg's class was a revelation. I'd never encountered a teacher quite like him or an approach like his. His work provoked in me a much deeper understanding of what was possible for an actor, especially in terms of specificity and nuance. His clients have appeared in some of the most celebrated film and television projects of the past decade. The ones we can mention include Riz Ahmed from The Sound of Metal and Rogue One, Michaela Cole from Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and I May Destroy You, Winston Duke from Black Panther and Us, Yaha Abdul Mateen II from Watchmen and The Trial of the Chicago 7, and Simone Ashley from Bridgerton and Sex Education. A graduate and a former faculty member of the Yale School of Drama, Berg studied under two legendary teachers, Mann and Earl Gister. He shares a story of how a single conversation with Earl changed the course of his life as he went from Broadway actor to the in-demand LA coach that he is today. In this episode, Berg takes us deep into his philosophy of acting, not just as performance, but as a practice of truth, imagination, and behavior. He talks about what it means to be private in public, why your body often knows more than your brain, and why trying to get it right is the death of spontaneity. So whether you're just starting out or you're already working, this episode is packed with the kind of insight that will stay with you. So enjoy this conversation with one of my very favorite teachers and a dear friend, Berg. Berg, welcome to the Acting Mastery podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure, a delight.
You know, when we launched this podcast, you were one of the first guests that I really hoped that I would have an opportunity to talk to, because as you know, you've been a big influence on me and on my own personal journey as an actor. I first met you in, I think it was around late 2008, early 2009. I was living in Los Angeles. I know it was a while ago. And a friend of mine was in your classes. I just signed with a big manager, and
I remember.
And she was someone who was working a lot. She was a series regular on a couple of shows and
Yes.
doing a lot of guest star roles. And she said, "You have to work with Berg. He's the best." And I came and audited a class and was just immediately blown away.
In this room, in this
that,
very room.
in that room. Yeah,
Very
many
neat.
memories of being in that studio. And I was just totally blown away by the standard of the work in that class, the commitment of the actors, and just the level of specificity that was present in the work. And as I began to work with you, I began to realize you were teaching an approach that I really hadn't come across at that stage in my career. And it was something of a revelation to me at the time, particularly your emphasis on the imagination. And I remember thinking, well, you know, you studied at Yale, and
Yes, I did.
Meryl Streep studied at Yale, and I remember thinking, oh, maybe this is why Meryl Streep's so good, because this must be what they learn at Yale. And I'm sure it's you know, you absolutely evolved your own approach to the work, but I guess I wanted to just begin by asking you a little bit about your journey. How did you come to become a coach?
You know, that's crazy. That's crazy because it was completely unintentional. It was completely accidental. As you had said, I was going to Yale as a student. And then at the end of 3 years, I had actually went there in my early 30s. So I was a little older, but at that time they had accepted a lot of people who were a lot older. The phenomenon of grad school was not, about 21, 22, 23 year olds, but the students tend to be older. So the point being, I had worked in New York as an actor. I'd done a Broadway play and I'd done some stuff as an actor, and I felt, as an actor, why would you apply to drama school if you're working? But
Mm.
for me, I just felt like I had started working too early. I'd
Mm.
started working too early, and that even though I had a beautiful foundation in terms of my reliance and trust of myself and my imagination and the possibility of the work I could be doing as opposed to the work that I was cast in or expected to do, I felt a bit limited. So I started working, and very, very quickly I started to learn, for lack of a better word, tricks,
Mm.
things I could depend on, things, leaning on my emotional state of being, which I was very, very able to do, personalized stuff. But I felt like to be perfectly blunt, my imagination was not operating in my work. And I became
Mm.
very, very sort of market oriented and very, very sort of result oriented, and so I thought, I know how to do this. I'm making a good living doing this, but there was something in me that just wanted to go back, just to go back to what I had when I was 17, which was this zeal, this excitement. And I studied with this marvelous, marvelous teacher named Paul Mann when I
Mm.
was 17, who trained Al Pacino. He trained, Ozzie Davis, Ruby Dee, Sidney Poitier, actors like that. He was like, and then, and the really, the only reason at 17, 18, I got into his class because I literally stalked him. I
Wow.
found out where he taught, at the Insomnia Hotel on 72nd Street. And I went, this is my man. This is, and so I would stand outside. It sounds like a story, but it's actually very true. Outside his classroom, and he would come out, and I said, "Mr. Mann, I've come to New York. I would like to study with you." And he looked at me and he said, "Great. Come back in 15 years." And so then the next fucking Thursday I was there, standing on the thing going, Mr. Mann, I need to study with you. Anyway, long story short, he took me into his class, and it was like such a marvelous, marvelous training ground. People like Barbara Loden, who was married to Elia Kazan at that time. People like that were in my class. Jason Robards would come in and out of class. People like that, and I was like a 17, 18-year-old. I can't remember how old. Just dumbstruck. But in 3 years, I was just like a maniac, and I began to learn a craft that was based in the imagination. Then I got a show that went to Broadway, and basically I started working. And so fast forward 12, 13 years later, and I was sitting there and I'm going, this feels like a job that I'm not that interested in anyway, because I had lost the challenges that I had given myself. You know,
Mm.
the that I was like afraid, uncomfortable in all the right ways, like going, wow, how can I do this differently? How can I bring my best dream state into the work? So I went to I knew the people who come out of Yale, but I must be honest, I did not go to Yale Drama School for Yale Drama School. I went
Right.
for a gentleman named Earl Gister, who was the
Yes.
main teacher there. And all the people have come out of Yale. He pretty much trained, people, Francis McDermott, Paul Giamatti, Angela Bassett, people like that. So in my audition, it was very strange. I said, he said I did my audition, and he said, "What? Okay, why do you want to come here? Why, at your age and with your experience, why do you want to come here?" And I literally, Ben, I said, I want to just throw everything I have learned and am out the window, and I want to go
Mm.
back to what I had when I was 17. And he said, "Well, what did you have?" And I told him. I said, the imagination, the possibility rather than the reality of what was. And he said, "Well, where did you find that?" And I said, well, I had this incredible teacher, which is why I'm such a believer in training and such a
Mm.
believer in people finding the right teacher for them.
Right.
I said, I had this teacher named, Paul Mann, and he taught me everything that I knew. And the interview, which is supposed to be, you're supposed to have callbacks, all of this stuff. The interview was, he just looked at me and he sat back very quietly. And all of a sudden, his eyes started to well with tears. And I looked at him and he said, "Did you know that Paul was my teacher? That he taught me
Wow.
everything I know and that I strive for." And my callback or interview was just both of us just looking at each other, just like tears, just like falling down our thing. And he said, "All right, get out of here." And so I knew that I was meant to go and study with him. And then, ironically, to get back to your question, when I was graduating, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, I don't know.
Mm.
And and he said, "You're a teacher." And
Mm.
I was shocked. I was like, I'm a teacher. And I suppose because of the comments I was making in class, all of the other stuff, helping the other students, sort stuff out as they helped me sort my stuff out. But
Right.
I said, okay, if I were a teacher, what should I do? And he said, go to Los Angeles. And I went, Los Angeles? I don't even like Los Angeles. Okay, I've grown to like it. I live here. I have a very comfortable, lovely life here. But I said, why would I go to LA? And he said, because that's where you're needed. And that was right on the precipice of the CW, where people were
Hmm.
at 18, 19, 20 years old, having careers and working, and the demise of the actual acting class, a legitimate acting class,
Hmm.
started to go down. And so you had all these kids who are working way, way, way too early, in
Mm.
terms of supporting themselves for a career, to
Right.
really have a craft that will sustain them, they're working when they're 60, 70. So I found his premonition of like, my placement here as
Mm.
needed based on my own experience, man, based on my
Wow.
own experience, what happened to me. And so I came here and boom. I mean, it just sort of it took off almost immediately. And so I felt like, wow, what an incredible, oh my God, I could get emotional thinking about it. What an
Mm.
incredible full circle that happened for me. Such a blessing. And completely not, completely accidental. And then I
Wow.
get to meet beautiful people like you, who I had the pleasure of training. And then what do? You take this and pass it on as well. And so that's why it's such, I mean, I feel like my connection to you is also part of that circle. I'm really grateful for that. Very
Thank you,
grateful.
Berg. I'm so grateful to you. And, I think it's one of the things that I often think about as both an actor and as a coach is just the fact that we're all standing on the shoulders of those who came
Absolutely.
before us. And the fact, what an incredible story, the fact that Earl Gister was trained by Paul Mann.
Yes.
And Paul Mann was originally trained by whom?
He was in the group theater. He
That's
was
right.
with Slavsky. He was with Meisner. He was a member of the group theater. And he actually, when this country has only one attempt at having a national theater, and that was
Hmm.
at Lincoln Center Lab in the 60s,
Mm.
where they had an attempt to, so they had Harold Clurman as the artistic director, people like Elia Kazan, directing plays. Arthur Miller was a resident playwright, like After the Fall, who
Mm.
my friend and my co fellow student Barbara Loden was. She played the original Maggie in
Wow.
in After the Fall, and so Paul, my teacher, was a resident acting teacher in that
Mm.
company.
Hmm.
Based on all of his stuff with the group theater and all of that stuff. So that was his, it's basically Stanislavski.
It's extraordinary to be able to draw that line all the way straight back to Stanislavski, and again, just these teachers passing on the knowledge, and it begins to evolve over time, and it's exactly as I was saying. It feels like you're standing on the shoulders of giants.
I was very fortunate. And listen, I mean, everybody has something valuable to say because I think it gets back to some core, core things that, whether you're doing Miser, you're doing Stella Adler, you're doing, any technique, as it were. I'm not a believer. Okay, great. Now I found this technique, and this technique is my technique.
Right.
It's got to translate through the artist. And
Mm.
all I believe a teacher should be able to do is provide, number one, a safe space, obviously,
Mm.
and number two, the opportunity to find their own grab bag of tools that
Yeah.
they can use. 'Cause I don't believe in actually teaching someone. I
Right.
honestly don't believe I can teach someone to act. What I can
Mm.
do is provide them with a bag of tools that they can utilize and mix and match for yourself, because every role is different, every
Right.
audition is different. To say there's a system in here, is not so valuable. It's the very reason I kept flunking out of mathematics in high school. And I'd be go, oh my God, there's a fucking answer here. I can't take it. There's a definitive answer. And the artist in me was like, fuck you. There was no answer. There's this exploration here. You
It's
know?
why we're actors, Berg. It's why we're actors.
Exactly.
Flunked out
To
of math.
sort it out. Yeah.
I'm curious to know what was the big, I guess, guiding philosophy or takeaway that you took from working with people like Paul Mann and Earl Gister. How did they inform your work?
I keep thinking of a couple of expressions that like resonated with me still. It's to ask permission is to seek denial. They
Mm.
they taught me to not ask permission of the text.
Mm.
That the text is a beautiful thing to illuminate who you are in that role. That does not mean when you're acting, it's your personality. Do you know?
Mhm.
It means it's your given private responses in a given situation, because I
Mm.
think emotion is very easy for a lot of actors, but
Sure.
privacy is not.
Mm.
Privacy is always a challenge. And that great work is steeped in the concept of utter catastrophe. Without the risk of utter catastrophe, you have no chance of any sort of brilliance. That you've got to risk all of that.
Mm. So well said. Can you define for our audience what you mean by privacy for an actor?
It's the responses that are not sort of steeped in cliche, in sentiment.
Hmm.
It's your honest, visceral responses to something, which a lot of times, if we're really dealing with who we are in the work, the thing of, okay, if I show this part or what I really feel about this, it may not be accepted. It
Mm.
may be scrutinized in a way that is supposed to be formalized for a larger group, but has nothing to do with the individual, which is me and my
Right.
desire to kind of speak my own truth, you
Mm.
know, and
Mm.
then connect that with you, the partner, or a colleague or something. And
Mm.
so that it's, I read something, and I'm always going to be drawn towards cliche. I'm inundated with it. Do you know what I mean? Where we, all day long, we're given all these barrages of things that are supposed to make us feel a certain way or do a certain way. And when you just step back from it and you go, wait a minute, that's really not what I feel,
Mm.
and then it gives you the feeling of being excluded rather than included.
Mm.
So I think that if you really indulge a privacy, and really that's your real goal, that actually it comforts somebody else, where they feel that they can speak out and and,
Mm.
and be heard. And I mean, we're in the business of empathy. That's what
Mhm.
I think acting is. We're in the business of empathy, you know
Absolutely.
and to erase those separations, which is why, inclusion is important and necessary. All of
Mm.
that stuff. Artists are, are being given a real a chance to kind of speak their own stories.
I heard a definition of empathy recently that really spoke to me. It was sort
Mm,
of talking about how sympathy is kind of thinking about a situation and relating to someone because you're like, oh, you're like me. We
Mm,
sympathize because you're like me, but empathy is actually acknowledging the difference. It's actually saying, "Oh, you may be nothing like me, and yet I feel for you. I can understand why you might behave in a certain way given the life experience you've had. You may be nothing like me, and yet I can extend myself to feel what it would be like to be in your shoes."
beautifully, beautifully stated, because then you truly are accepting the other person.
Right.
You're not tolerating the other person in
That's it.
terms of you, but you're just accepting whoever that is, whatever they believe, as a separate entity that has a
Mm,
right to speak and has a right to exist and a right
mm,
to just be. And then leave that alone, and know that someone else is going to look at, you know, any opposing opinion or whatever, and then feel a sense that, okay, I can have my own as well, even if it doesn't fit with either one of what I've just
mm,
seen. So
mm.
I love that. I think that's
Yeah.
really, really, really well said.
And it acknowledges the difference as well, which I think is
Absolutely.
important.
Which is, what are we doing this for? To
Right.
acknowledge our differences,
That's it.
to acknowledge our individualities,
Yeah.
you know, and to really do that. I mean, I know that that's a platitude, but to really, 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 really live in your own skin and know
Mm,
that that's good. That's valuable. It needs to be heard. It
mm.
needs to be heard.
Just to come back to that idea of privacy as well, I guess really, the actor's challenge is to be private in public.
Yes.
Where do you begin by helping an actor to do that, to achieve that? And what's the obstacle in your mind to an actor being able to be private in public, given that there is an audience watching?
By reading the text and putting away the idea
Mm,
of what you think you have just read, to not follow your first impulse about
mm,
things or your first opinions about things. It's like a relationship to anything. You have to give it time. You have to
mm,
give it thought. You have to let it ruminate in your body. And then slowly, 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 it reveals itself to you. You know,
mm,
I don't believe in creating characters.
mm,
I believe in standing back and being able to listen. I think that I'm creating a character when the character starts telling me who I am and what
mm,
I feel, as opposed to reading something and going, this is this, this is that, this is this, and you know what I mean? It's all a way of separating yourself from it. You know,
mm,
when casting says, okay, could you throw it away? Could you throw it away? I think a lot of actors think, okay, great, now I'm going to adapt a sort of a monosyllabic tone that sort of like talks like this, and now I'm being real, and now I'm being natural. That's not neither. That's inactive. You're
right.
not committing to anything. So when I think they say, could you throw it away? Could you throw it away? I think they're actually saying, could you throw away your idea
Yes.
of what you're
Yeah.
doing,
That's
your
exactly it.
idea of this scene? Can
Mm,
you just throw that away? And can we find something together? Can we
mm,
find something together? And I think that that's the point, because in casting, I don't believe, I'm not a casting director,
mhm,
but in as a teacher, all I really want to see is not good or bad, because I always ask, do you want to be right, or do you want to be interesting? Do you want to be
mm.
right, or do you
Love
want to
it.
be interesting? You know, because once you throw away that idea, like, you're left with yourself, and then you're left with your own fears, you're left with your own dreams, and all of that is a self confrontation. I believe
Mm,
Orson Welles says the work is as good as it expresses the artist who creates it, and I love that quote.
mm,
And that's about being so it's about being quiet at the beginning, which
mm.
for me is really terrifying. It's really terrifying, you know,
Absolutely.
to just sit in something and go, I don't know,
Mm,
which is the most valuable sentence I think any artist can approach work with. I don't know.
mm,
I don't have an answer here. I'm showing up and trying to garner information so that something hopefully coagulates and formulates within my body. And that thing should not be expected. that thing should be as much a surprise to you, the audience, as it is to me. No surprises for me, no surprises for you. I don't think. And so it's all about stop manipulating, because ultimately when you read something and you're reading it over and over, and you're doing a self-tape and you're taping it over and over and over, you're just trying to fucking hit a line reading that you
Right.
somewhere have in your head. You know? And so I think that when people are doing their self-tapes over and over and over again, I don't think they understand the scene. It's not that they don't understand the situation. They understand the situation. The situations are pretty, but they don't understand the underbelly of what the event or what the scene really is about. And that has got to trace back to you somehow and your understanding of it. I mean, Monday, it's your Hamlet. Tuesday, it's my Hamlet. Better be a different show, man. Better be a
Right.
completely different show.
That's so well said. I was just thinking too about that comment about casting saying throw it away and throw away your idea. I think they're also often saying like throw away your line reading because you become
Absolutely.
absolutely attached to how you think it should sound. I love
Absolutely.
what you said too about do you want to be right or do you want to be interesting?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much pressure I think actors put on themselves to get it right. In fact, there is no right way to do the scene. Do you want to speak to that?
I think when we're thinking of what's the right way to do the scene, I think that the second thought is you really have an opinion of what you think they are looking for,
Yeah.
you know? And they're looking for you. And
Mm,
as Martha Graham says, I mean, there's only one you in all space and time. And what that means is not, in my opinion, there's not that there's plenty of people that, nah, maybe not plenty, but there are other people who have your personalities, have your quirks, all of that stuff. But your imagination, how you perceive things, how you really dream about something, how those images, when you dream, are formulated into illogical thought, not logical thought. This equals this equals this equals this, which is getting it right. Which is why, again, I couldn't stand mathematics, because you
right.
would go, okay, here's this. Now that goes into that, and that goes into that, and boom, your answer. And I would go, my body doesn't believe that. My body doesn't associate that. So I think that getting it right is having a picture of what you think casting wants. And they don't know what they want. They're the first people to tell you that. They want you.
Right.
That's what they want,
Yeah.
you know? So I think that that's important to reclaim your audition, man. It's your audition. It's not their audition. And I think that self-tapes and stuff are in a marvelous, marvelous space right now, because what I'm encouraging my students to do is make mini 1 minute films, mini 1 minute films that they hit the street, and they actually are getting away from the screen they're standing around, the backdrop, and like doing it, and getting out on the street and actually creating a mini film. And so I find that is pretty much beginning to be the movement here in Los Angeles, because COVID sort of, of course it changed everything, but I couldn't imagine sitting at a desk watching tape after tape after tape of auditions, people making the same choices, and doing the same physical actions, because they're all following the script.
Right.
That's where it comes from. It
Yeah.
doesn't come from being dim-witted or less ability. It's again being restricted by the page. So that when my students, I'm saying, man, hit the streets, create something that all of a sudden they're not only divorcing them from the cliche of what it should look like, but they're actively training themselves how to be a young filmmaker, which I think is fantastic. Which
Right.
is fantastic, because the age of sitting around waiting for the phone to ring, man, that's gone.
Absolutely.
People have iPhones. They have iPhones. There's no reason for you not to be creating major content, and then parlaying short films into film festivals, and then getting the funding to do a feature. And that's, for me, that's the only way to go now. And I think like networks and stuff, major, they're coming around. A student of mine who was at an audition for CBS, my gosh, they said, Could you get out of your house with this audition? It was actually there in the audition. And so I think all of that is problem solving while you're doing it, which I
Right.
think gets you away from the idea of it because you're so you're so busy working out, what you can do with this that you don't have time to kind of like going, well, it should look like this, or
Mm.
it should be making choices, that are so based in cliche, and you've seen it before.
It's really taking complete ownership over that audition too.
I think so.
I know we recently talked to Jerry Grinnell, and he talked a lot about
He's
that idea,
marvelous,
isn't he? Yeah.
marvelous, marvelous, marvelous. I'm a huge fan.
Just that whole idea of authorship as an actor, that as long as you're playing the role, you're the author of that character. So what do you want to do? What are you bringing to the
Absolutely.
table?
Right. And then you're providing beautiful gifts to the editor. Because I mean, ultimately, I don't believe it's the actor's medium film. I don't even think it's a director's medium.
Hmm.
Of course, they all work in collaboration, but I
Mm.
actually think it's the editor's medium. And
Right.
the editor is the storyteller.
Mm.
In and so that you're just providing provocative choices that they can weave what they're going to weave. And that's difficult because it's really about giving up control for the actor, about
100%.
really giving up the control of how it's eventually gonna look,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, because as we know, an editor can make or break a performance. I've seen editors ruin good performances, and I've seen them save terrible performances. It really is their medium.
Absolutely.
Do you think that I'm just curious with this idea of getting out onto the street and kind of treating your audition like a short film? What kind of response have your students and clients been getting?
I mean, and very good. I mean, straight to booking, actually. Straight.
Wow.
In fact, there's crazy, crazy story. I have one student who was helping another student film an audition, and they did a period thing. I don't, they did it was set in 2000, and they got a VHS camera, and they were filming each other, passing the camera back and forth, just while they're filming this crazy, it was like for like, they were both 16, but
Right.
they created this like mayhem, and it just looked like a really gritty independent film. Long story short, not only was the person who was auditioning cast, but they said to the guy, uh, "Who's your friend? Who's your friend?" And the guy who was helping, both of them, my students, the guy who was helping got cast as well, straight off the tape,
Oh
because of
my
their
God.
chemistry,
Right.
because of the chemistry between the two of them and the trust and the fun that they
Yeah.
had. They turned this around in like an afternoon,
Wow.
just. And so I think that that's really where it's headed. I just
Mm.
I couldn't imagine. I mean, you're seeing actor after actor in front of the backdrop, and then and a short film comes on that's well made.
Hmm.
That's well made, not technically, but in terms of the force and the commitment to the artists who are doing it. And
Mm.
they're like, my God. I mean, and ironically, I asked, how is it filmed? How is it
Mm.
actually filmed after they did it? Not that different from what they submitted. So the director just took the ideas and just went to the moon with it and improved on it. And so, I think that's great. Why not? It's a collaborative process.
It's a very exciting idea, really, to be just as an actor to really take ownership of that role like that, and to know that to kind of elevate your audition into a piece of art, not just another, just another self tape, but actually to
Right.
feel like you're contributing in that way to the potential of who this character could be.
Mhm.
It's just a much more exciting way to approach a role, I think.
And can you imagine watching that? You'd go, "Oh my God, this artist is the most creative, imaginative out there. They're not afraid. They're just not afraid." And then I'm not a director, but I would imagine, well, thank God I don't have to tell the actor what to do or try to feed the actor ideas. They're coming with a multitude of things that they want to try, you know? And so I think I would be very encouraged to see that. If I'm a director and I would see an actor do a great audition and they come back and they do it the same way, I'm going to be worried. I'm going to be worried. Ooh, this person has a clamp of an idea of what is, or as opposed to what could be, and we're all here to find it together.
And I'm sure too, it's funny you should mention that. I sometimes direct commercials, and there was a commercial a while ago where I had an actor submit what was almost like a short film just for this commercial. And in the end, he wasn't quite what the client was looking for in terms of his look, but nobody forgot that audition. Like I'll always remember that actor because of what he gave us. So what an amazing way to stand out. So
Yeah.
Berg, I'm curious to know, when someone begins working with you, I know you work with some pretty extraordinary clients, including some Oscar winners.
Yes.
Where do you begin in the journey of helping them to approach a role? Where do you begin? Where do you have them begin?
Great question. I try to get them to begin with their body. In other words, to analyze something, or to work dramaturgically, to understand something here does not help you play it. You can understand something, I mean, you can understand your problems in therapy till you're blue in the face, and until you get out there and do something about it, it's still gonna reside. So I like to start working with the possibility of art, of visual stimuli, of music, of texture, so that they begin to consider the material not intellectually or dramaturgically, but from texture, from sound, from actual movement. There was a beautiful exercise that I did, that a woman, she brought in a painting, and it was just incredibly like vivid, abstract painting with the beautiful colors and all of this stuff. And I said, then she brought in a piece of music completely unrelated to the painting, just from her own desire, from her own hunger, from what she wanted to do. And so then we played the music, and then I asked her to move as if she were in this painting, as if these colors and all of the forms of the painting were beginning to envelop and control and illuminate her body through the music. And then I said, okay, great, speak text. And she started to she started to speak text from the Terminator. These like sort of like standard villain things. And we were all like, our jaws dropped over and said, if this were a supervillain, what an original take on this. How that nobody would come up with this concept, this
Right.
concept of the role, not execution, but concept. And so it came after the movement, after the listening, after that, and then a beautiful original supervillain began to emerge, and we were going, my God, if we saw this on tape, we saw this on tape, it would be such a viable possibility. And
Wow.
so to get you immediately into the body, into working viscerally, and then working through the expression of, as I said, music, fabric, sound, all of that stuff. Like I've asked, what is the vibration of this scene? What is the vibration of this scene? And that is something that you can relate to, because I think that actors are they're very extraordinarily sensitive and intelligent people, but it's more of a theatrical intelligence, I believe. More in terms of like, art, music, stuff that we relate to, some stuff that, all artists are like imbue and attach themselves to. I mean, even though I think most actors are very, very, very smart, the intellect does not help. The body helps. And that's the only way I know if something is authentic. Not if I think it, or if I feel it emotionally, but I respond to it. I think that emotion and dialogue are the last things that happen. A body has an entire experience on film, which is why the camera watches. It doesn't listen. It watches you.
Mm.
And it's looking at your body. So, my hand going like this is telling you more about the scene than anything I could say. So it's getting them away from analysis into acceptance and execution, which means for me exploration.
Just bypassing the intellect like that.
Absolutely, because I say you don't have to concentrate. You don't have to concentrate. I can't concentrate. I'm a dreamer. I'm an actor. If I could concentrate, I'd be a Wells Fargo banker.
Mm-hmm.
But I encourage you to pay attention. To pay attention, so you don't have to concentrate, because concentration for me, in my definition, has a fixed point. And then I give up the potential that the air conditioner or the sound of the air conditioner has as much potential as a source to affect me as you do, or the conversation, so that we're really living in a 360 visceral world and we're hypersensitive. Because I don't think being sensitive means, thinking of emotion and sort of like jacking myself up for an emotional sense of a sense of being. I think being sensitive means, or sensitizing my body means discarding, emptying my body, so
Wow.
that I am available. That the slightest thing is going to affect me, and I'm just going to respond, which I think is ultimately what we should be doing after the word action.
Right.
Is just responding. But it takes a lot of homework to get to that place. It gets a lot of script analysis and all the stuff that you would think was intellectual, but not if you begin to translate it, so that the film actor begins to think of analysis much more visually, much more tactily, much more instead of thought. And then that opens up your definition of what your choices are in terms of what you're supposed to be imaging. Like I could say, oh, look at that beautiful mountain. And I'm taught, okay, great. So what does a mountain look like? I can smell the mountain. I can taste the mountain. All of the sensory work on mountain, but that's not even the image.
Right.
If you're my son, I want you to come home. It could be, with my wife giving you a nice, beautiful bath when you were 1 year old. And that's the image for the word mountain, because I want you back, So when you're working like that, it really goes like, wait a minute. I'm not supposed to be be correct what I am saying, because it's not what we do in life. We don't image what we are saying.
Right. Very true. So I'm curious. I love what you said about concentration, and I guess how when you're concentrating, your whole field of focus just narrows onto one point, and you're
I
kind
think
of
so.
cutting off all of this other possibility to
I think
be
so.
affected by what's around you.
Hmm.
So to just to pay attention, to become sensitive to really an impulse coming from anywhere.
Hmm. Yes. And so when I say concentrating, don't concentrate, I don't mean don't have an expectation of
Mm,
how you're going to affect the partner, because it should all be a part about the partner. I
hmm.
don't I think every source that you have, anything, is outside yourself and
Right.
resides in the partner,
Mm,
not in what my teacher Earl would call self-generating, not
mhm,
providing. And
mhm.
so I do think that, I don't have to have a fixed point, but I certainly have to have an expectation of how I'm moving the target, how I'm moving you. And then I'm just like, just moving in terms of, did that happen? Did that not happen? And taking points in my head in terms of if that did happen or did not happen, so that I can continue to activate an objective.
Right.
But words like objective, Ben, I don't even ah. I would rather, when words like "what's your relationship" in a text, what I find
Right.
actors do is they start to explain to me. They start
Right.
to talk to me. They start to go, explain what I already know because I've read the script. So
Mm,
they're giving me information that is textually based that I already know. I would rather you show me. Like if you go, this is my relationship with my wife. And then that goes into psychological gesture, and my body goes, okay, I know that. I know what that is. So I don't worry about, oh my gosh, am I gonna be able to get to that emotional point? I don't have all these worries. I don't think a dancer shows up at 6 o'clock in the evening, whatever, to dance at 8 and worries about if they're gonna be able to do the performance. They just start physically warming up. So I think that anything that invaluable in acting has to do with the, not anything, but most of the stuff has to do with finding it physically.
Mm. And it's wonderful too, that approach, because it leads to behavior, which of course then reveals the character. It's like that Meisner quote about, an ounce of behavior is worth a pound of words.
Absolutely, Ben. Absolutely. And then I as the audience can interpret that behavior.
Hmm.
When I'm emotionally based and emotionally bound, and I have an emotion and I'm going, okay, great. Now the audience, I'm sort of cueing the audience. It's like a sentimental soundtrack in a film. You go, okay, great. Thank you for cueing me. I'm supposed to be sad now.
Mm.
It robs the audience of a potential to participate because you're going, okay, great. You're telling me what to feel, and I have no choice to either feel it or turn off, which is why, and a lot of times I turn off, which is why I'm watching actors cry rather than them, the actor doing a very simple physical thing, and I burst into tears, you know,
Mm. Mm.
because we're
So well said.
cueing the body. We're cueing the body. You know, I one summer I was obsessed with finding out why in film there are certain performances where the actor cries and I cry exactly at the same second,
Mm.
as opposed to watching an actor cry and then maybe a lag of 5 or 10 seconds, and then I feel emotional. And so I'm going, what is the answer for this? So I started to watch Spike Lee's Four Little Girls, a beautiful documentary about these children who were like, blown up in a church in Atlanta, civil rights.
Mm.
And the documentary was their mothers. That's all there was. And so there was very, very, very difficult stuff to watch.
Mm.
Very difficult stuff to watch. But what I did was I stopped the camera and I stopped it
Paused.
and paused. Thank you. And I backtracked it like a minute before the tears happened. And I literally, Ben, went frame by frame by frame by frame. And I realized unwittingly the entire minute before their bodies were cueing me what was going to happen. But I did not know that. And so from that moment on, I went, wait a minute. Acting is completely physical on film. That does not
Mm.
mean the emotion is not a side product.
Hmm.
But when I realized that I was being cued the entire time physically, as you say, behaviorally, I
Mm.
went, okay, man, emotion's gonna happen, but I ain't gonna. I'm not gonna depend on it. I'm not gonna depend on it because it's too mercurial. It's gonna come and go. It's gonna come and go. It's nothing that you can depend on. You can depend on your.
I love that, Berg. Extraordinary. What a revelation to have had. What questions then should an actor begin to ask themselves when approaching a script? How do you get your clients, for example, to begin to think about a piece of music or a piece of art or a texture? Is it that you read the script and you begin to think about, well, what does this remind me of? What speaks to me in terms of a piece of music that this scene might be like? What kind of questions should they ask in order to begin to explore that kind of work?
Why am I doing this?
Mm.
What does this scene mean to me? Why?
Mm.
What am I trying to investigate about not only myself, but I call it the human question, all of us,
Mm.
all of us. And so because then you're really beginning to give an audition or the work an identity that is yours, and it's a first step towards merging you with the character.
Mm.
Because I was taught, by Earl at Yale that there is no character on film. There is no character. And when you watch yourself on film later and you see, I mean, I've had the experience of watching myself on film. I go, oh, wow, that's very, very different from me. I didn't realize I was doing it, because I was so ensconced in the behavioral aspect and why I was doing this to begin with. And I think that when we get auditions, we get such an image of what it's supposed to look like. The aesthetic. Oh, this is soap opera. This is rom com. This is like sitcom. This is this that we begin to go. Okay, I don't even know why I'm showing up here. I'm showing up here to please what I think you want to see, which is death, which is removed from yourself. So the first thing is, why am I doing this? It's the first one of the first questions I ask in class. Why did you choose this material? What are you trying to say with this material? And I've even had exercise work where I've said, okay, great, in maintaining safety, what's going on with you, blah blah blah. It's called an interior monologue, where the actor talks about some stuff. I mean, within safety and what they want to discuss. And then I say, great, now do the scene and think of that. And boom, it has an immediacy privacy, it has immediate stakes, you know? And so I think that that's the first thing I want them to, any actor to go is, why are you doing what you're doing? And you got to think of that as a career, man, because your definition of why you're acting at one point of your life is very different, very different. And I find as a teacher, the more I teach, the less I know, and the more I'm curious, and that
Amen.
I really accept that there's a simpatico that happens between us, that both of us are like, whoa, what the hell is that? I didn't expect that. And so it's getting simpler and simpler and simpler, and for me, more visual, and more sensorial or visceral.
So interesting. So this is why I love your work, Berg. Can you maybe explain what you mean? Because you've used the term a couple of times, and I know it's a big part of your work. What you mean by sources?
Mm,
Giving yourself as an actor sources in a
right,
scene.
right,
What is a
right.
source?
A source is anything outside yourself that will affect change in your body so that you can take that change and affect the partner. So, an I also think when I'm having a source, like if I look up and I see the ceiling here, it's I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the source to answer a question that's going to help me reach you. So it's not just, okay, this is my source, this is my source, this is my source, and grafting it on this frame. It's really having a conversation with the source. As we have an image, as we have an image in life, and all of a sudden we're questioning that image, or we're asking for advice or guidance, or we're telling that image what we want from it, so that it becomes about not identification, but it becomes about communication with that source,
Mm-hmm.
you know because of course, because I can plant something. I have this beautiful exercise where here's the camera and I have a negative source and a positive source to either side of the camera, and they're controlling the scene.
Mm-hmm.
They're controlling the scene. So I look over here, I'm having that conversation with it, I bring that back to you, and then I do that, and it's completely different. So I'm completely being affected and challenged and changed by the things around me, which is why I think environments are so important. And the last thing actors think about when they make their tapes,
Right.
until they hit the road, and then it's all about environment. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In making these like short films, it becomes all about the environment. And
Mm.
so an environment for me is, as far as standing in front of a screen, is sadly left out
Mm-hmm.
because there are no sources,
Mm-hmm.
because it's about emoting and contacting the partner. Well, you know, anything can contact me, anything can
Right.
affect change in me, you
Yeah.
know? So it's again having a conversation with what I am looking at. Does that make sense?
Mm.
What I'm saying?
It
Conversation.
That does make sense. It's allowing yourself to be generated by what's around you.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, something that I remember was a big revelation for me in your class was the way in which you would use props, for example, as a source. Because that was
Mm.
something that I think in my training had never really been discussed. Like it was the potential or the possibility of what a prop could be in a scene. That it
Mm.
doesn't just have to be something that's there because it's in the environment of the character, but that props could suddenly become elevated into something that could also generate you, that they could become metaphor, or they could become, you know, a metaphor for a relationship. Like if these glasses remind me of my relationship with my late grandfather, then the
Mm.
way I interact with these glasses becomes very specific,
Mm-hmm.
and how I feel about them as I wear them. It just takes on a different meaning, or the possibility of the prop to be used as a way of, again, affecting the other person in the scene, as another tool to affect them. Could you maybe speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, on set, I don't even, director. I was just talking to a director who was in my class last night. I was talking about how I don't even write blocking in my script. What I actually do is write the source. Like if a director goes, "Okay, could you cross to that table, and could you stand at the table and then look over here?" And they're thinking about, we want the light to hit your left eye. They're thinking completely technically for camera blocking. But I write down the source, so I'll find something like picture of mother of the picture of the mother that's on the desk. So I have cross to mother. I'll write in my script
Mm,
so that when I'm crossing, I'm already beginning to fantasize about the reality of how the source affects me. As you started to pick up your glasses, right? And
mm,
started to fantasize immediately, you gave yourself something to allow you to go away, not to be here or be in the moment, but to actually go away, which is what I think a character thought is.
mm-hmm,
It's not a paraphrasing of what you are
mm,
saying.
mm-hmm,
It's subtext. It's completely different from the text. And
mm,
so, I mean, I felt, there was a beautiful story that Earl said to my friend Kyle. We were the first day at Yale, and Kyle was sort of beautiful person, beautiful actor. He was
mm,
just, but Kyle was at that period was always in a cloud, beautifully, just a dreamer. And he was sitting in class, and Earl was walking back and forth, and he stopped in front of Kyle and he said, "You're dreaming. You're you're away. You're going away. You're dreaming." And Kyle, very respectful, said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to give you any disrespect." And Earl just said, "That's fine.
mm.
It's good. You're just preparing yourself for a future role."
Mm.
I was
Wow.
like, "Oh shit! I found a secure teacher." I was
No
like,
kidding.
"What the fuck did he just say? You're
Yeah.
preparing yourself for a future role instead of like, egotistically, you're not paying attention to me and blah 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 blah
Right.
blah." So
Yeah.
going back to the
Mm,
sources, back to one, you're just allowing yourself to kind of drift away into a fantasy of what mother looks like on the desk, and
mm,
then give different nuances to that. Like one, you can think
mm,
of like something maybe, that something that it was sad or bad that happened, and you have that nuance, and then you back to one, and you're still thinking about the same source, which is
mm-hmm,
mother, but you could have a completely different response to it. But you're
mm.
doing the same scene. You're
Right.
dealing with the same source, you
Yes.
know? And so
Yeah.
it really opens up not to kind of repeat, because I mean, you can't really repeat anything. It's a
Mm.
back to one is a whole different ball game, in terms of potentially your internal life.
So, if an actor's thinking about sources like that, what should they, or how can they begin to investigate that? They can actually look around at their environment and
Hmm.
begin to think, what might this mean to me, or what
Hmm. how can I relate to this is how I would put it. Not what it means to me, but how I can relate to this, how this source is going to help me
Mm.
reach you,
Mm-hmm.
reach you. Because you're the primary thing I want to change, obviously. You know, it's all about changing the partner. It's not about expressing yourself or having a conversation. It's about change. It's about a revolution. It's about having you change your actions, feelings, or beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm looking at the source in terms of that, I know that this, by taking this in and considering this, that's going to potentially change you, then you're connected to it. So I'm not sort of lost in Sunset
Mm.
Boulevard land. I'm not
Right.
lost in source land. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah, look, I know you can't talk in any detail about the kind of work you do with some of your celebrity clients, but I can actually maybe give an example. You coached me on a film several years ago. I don't even know if you'd remember, but I was playing a psychiatrist who was a real prick. And
I do remember this.
yeah, and there was some scenes where I have another psychiatrist who I is my inferior, and I spend a lot of time talking down to her. He's not a
Right.
nice guy. And I remember some of the work that you helped me do, which was so incredibly beneficial, was, I hadn't obviously seen the set, but I knew one of the scenes, for example, was in my office. And you
Mhm.
said, I want you to just imagine that this office is your kingdom and you're the
Mm,
king. And
mm,
everything in this office is to remind you of your superiority. You don't even have to look at the qualifications on the wall. You just know that they're there,
right,
reinforcing the fact that you are better than her. And
right.
it just allowed me a way of being in the scene. I didn't have to try to show anything. I could just be the king. And I remember even as we were blocking the scene, I decided I should be the one sitting and she could stand because I was the king
Mm,
on my throne. Or there was actually another scene where I was walking down a hallway as she was talking to me, and I had nurses handing me forms to sign. And I remember picking up a pen, going to sign this form, and realized that the pen had not been clicked, that there was no pen when I went to sign. And I just looked at the nurse in the moment, like, how dare you not
Well,
click my pen? It was just one of those things that in the moment, having created that environment and those sources and become so clear metaphorically on who this character was for me, that behavior could just then those moments could just happen
mhm.
without planning anything. And of course, that's the moment that made it into the film.
Exactly. And then when you're working that way, objects or sources, I don't even call them props anymore. I call them sources. They
Mm.
they evolve, they become different things. Like that pen became something very different for you. You know,
Hmm.
it was your sword, your kingly boom, this is it. This is
That's
mine.
right.
And then you handle it differently rather than any pedestrian can pick up the pen and sign the contract or do whatever the scene asks for,
Hmm.
you know. So for
Mm.
me, film, it's not the arias that I'm interested in, it's the
Hmm.
notes between the arias that are fascinating.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so John crosses the street. Mary puts on her hat. Joseph takes, cuddles his 6-year-old. Those are the epic scenes and the most interesting scenes for me, because that's the weaving, connecting tissue that I believe create great performances. Because great performances are just behavior, are just behavior.
Mm.
And some of the behavior is logical and some of it is illogical. And the more illogical it is, it's more of a blessing for me to watch, because then I have to put the pieces together. The director and the editor and the actors and shoving their choices at me and telling me what I have to think or
Hmm.
feel. I resent that.
Well, that was another big revelation that I had working with you, Berg, was that human beings are not logical all the time. We are highly illogical, and to allow for that in the work, that not everything is linear. We're also non-linear. Can you maybe speak a little bit to that notion?
Well, I think that, I think that the erratic thinking or allowing oneself to be nonlinear or not to package it or organizes it, you know, gives me different possibilities of number one, what I feel about the scene, what I'm going to do about the scene. And it feels scarier. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like, my God, I have to trust myself not to feel the necessity to explain what I am
Mm.
doing,
Amen.
you know?
Yeah.
And so if I, in the middle of this podcast, if I just like go like that and do something that is not actually logical to what I would do, then the audience is more than willing to use their imagination and interpret that and
Mm.
go, that's the reason behind it. And hopefully, the person sitting next to you can have a completely different concept of what that means. That's the
Mm.
beauty of art. That you go to a museum, you're standing with your best friend, and you go, "Oh, I see that in this painting," and your friend goes, "Oh my God, I see that in this painting." And it's completely different. So that there's something in the room between the screen and the audience that combusts and has its own life. And I feel like anytime I'm trying to be practicable about
Mm-hmm.
life and trying to be logical about it. Like, this should work because this should fit into this, should fit into this. It's always fucking disastrous. It
Mm-hmm.
never works. Where I
Mm-hmm.
go, I don't know. I just, this is what I feel and this is what I'm going to try. And let's see where it goes. Those are
Mm.
always the most successful for me. I always,
Mm.
I always learn, truly learn from the erratic, not
Mm.
not the logical, not what makes sense.
I love that. And as you said, it leaves it open to interpretation rather than trying to spell it all out for the audience. Or rather than
Absolutely.
having an actor try to show you how they're
Mhm,
feeling or
mhm.
what they're doing rather than just, again, rather than just being and
Mhm.
trusting that the audience is smart enough to
I love that.
interpret.
I
Yeah.
love that. And just it gets down to trusting
Mm.
anything you do is valid. Why? Because you're doing it. Why? Because it's your role. It's your thing, man. It's your Hamlet. It's your Hamlet. You can do anything you fucking want. It's your
That's really the secret, isn't it? That you can do anything that you want.
It's true though.
Yeah, that's
And
it.
and what that is not innovative doesn't completely buck the system. And
Right.
it's not the point to go, oh, I'm gonna buck the system, I'm gonna do something else. You do that because you have to do it.
Mm.
Because you just can't do anything that your body does not feel that is authentic anymore. And
Right.
then it just becomes a way of work,
Mm.
becomes a way of work that your body becomes really sensitive to know, okay, what's cliche, what's sentiment, what's there, and actually what is. And
Mm.
I find that it's so much more relaxing and
Mm.
enjoyable and fun to do what you want to do
Mm-hmm.
and not what you feel you can or should do.
Yeah.
You know, I just think that's old. I just think that's old thinking. I do. And I'm so glad that people have iPhones. I mean, you know what I mean? When I was starting, I it was the Mesozoic era. I had rocks and stones to communicate. You have your iPhone, you can do anything. The world is your oyster.
Right.
And so I really am really excited about the possibility of empowering the individual and
Mm.
really, really, really knowing and instilling individual, you have that power.
Mm-hmm.
You have that power. You have the power because you're participating.
That's it.
You could be doing something else.
You could be.
Most actors are smart. They could be doing other things. They
Mm.
choose to do this. And so if this is a life choice, man, have fun. Have fun, have fun. And I mean that in a practical way, not in a sort of like, oh yes, let's have fun doing it. I think it's in a necessity to have
Mm.
fun. And it's almost a necessity to find the joy in your work, because
Mm.
then everything becomes about love. The pursuit of every scene is about the pursuit of love and about connection. I
Mm.
can't care for somebody who doesn't need,
Mm.
who's self-sufficient. I can watch, but I don't care.
Yeah. And so then even a character that might be pursuing power, they might be pursuing power because there's an absence of love or or they think it might get them love.
Absolutely. You go
Mm,
back to that, you know, because the circumstances of a script are going to be different from your circumstances, obviously.
mm,
Obviously. But if you connect to a core need, a
mm,
core kernel that is about extending yourself, not expressing yourself, but extending yourself to
mm.
extending, I can't do this, take my hand. Then the audience cries because everyone feels that way. Everyone feels, somewhat sort of like getting through things, or sometimes, not always, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
lost, or those things that make us need.
How can an actor explore that need? Is there a tool or an exercise that you would encourage actors to use
Sure,
in order to connect to need?
sure, sure. Fall in love. Have a baby.
Yeah, that works.
Have a baby. Fall in love. Fall in love with the wrong person.
Yeah, yeah. Been there
But
too. Yeah.
anything that keeps you in a state of openness,
Mm,
in a state of possibility,
mm,
in a state of questioning and not
mm,
knowing. I think it's very dangerous for any artist to think that they have found anything.
mm,
It's to keep exploring, keep exploring, keep exploring. One thing leads to another, which leads to another. So I have no answers when I work on a script. I only have
mm,
questions. And one question after another, and then it all leads to, why am I doing this?
mm,
What do I, it's not how am I seen,
mm-hmm.
but what do I see?
And that was something else I really got working with you was the difference between, if you think about it really, actors are getting too concerned with how they're being seen and not concerned enough with what they're seeing. If they actually get interested in what they're seeing, then what they're seeing becomes the source that generates them rather than them having to generate themselves. You're actually beginning to get yourself and your self-consciousness out of the way.
Absolutely, 100%,
Mm,
so that the content you know you are posting, and Instagram, all of that stuff, actually can be original, actually can be provocative, you know and provocative, what does that mean? Provocative means anytime you really express who you are and what you actually feel is provocative. It's
mm,
provocative because it's
yeah.
individual, and you have a sense of ownership of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, hey, the internet is here to stay, obviously,
Mm,
but I think it can be utilized in a very smart way that expresses who you are, and hopefully expresses your love, and
mm.
expresses your need to be a part of, not to be separate from.
That's
Yeah.
beautifully said. Beautifully said. What advice do you have for actors that are maybe either just beginning in their career
Mhm.
or are looking to kind of, I guess, reinvigorate their career? Maybe they're feeling a little bit creatively stuck um,
Mhm.
or looking to kind of have another breakthrough or
Mhm.
kickstart things along.
First of all, I think it's crucial to have a community
Mm,
around you, because I've never had, especially, at the beginning of my career, I never had an accurate assessment of actually who I was. I always
mm,
identify myself through other people. You know,
mm,
I don't think that there's a core personality that I have. I'm just reactive in terms of who's in front of me.
mm-hmm,
And so I think the first thing is to have a group of people around you that understand you,
mm-hmm,
that know and relate to what you want to acquire. And that is having a great teacher. I really mean that. I was so fortunate and
mm,
gifted to have an incredible teacher, the first teacher. Then I kind of knew bullshit from then on out. Do you know what I mean?
mm-hmm,
I was like, okay, great, ba 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 ba. But that community that I very, very, very quickly surrounded myself with was
mm,
able to encourage me,
mm,
to accept me, and
mm.
and to let me know that it's good to be
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
to be different. So it sounds like, okay, great. What can I do? I think that that's the first real step to really come into a place, not in a result oriented fashion. Okay, I'm going to do this class or this workshop, this to get this, and this, and this, and this, but to have the potential of showing you possibility that you just never thought existed.
Yeah.
And you go, wow, it's not like when I went to when I studied with my teacher Earl, it's not that I felt like I had a different viewpoint on things. I felt like I had different eyes, that my aesthetic of what I wanted to achieve was different. And it quite frankly surprised me. And so I also encourage people to read, read those frickin' Russian novels, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy. They are so full of imagery that
Right.
you can't negotiate. I remember in my 20s, I was obsessed with Russian novels. Because of that, I went, I cannot read this and not go away because I have to provide the imagination that
Yeah.
I'm reading, as opposed to, Instagram or these like 30-second things that are like barraging you with what you're supposed to be learning. And so to go to an art museum and know that that's as valuable as going to an acting class, to go to a concert, a ballet, and I mean, I guess this is old school stuff, but I think it's essential because I do think we are living in an age that is very, 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 very slowly chipping away at our very imaginations. And I think that your imagination, again, is who you are and your claim to originality. And so if you are not really continually re-endorsing and protecting that, I think we're all going to be AIs, man. I think we're all going to be freaking typed in. I really honestly do. And the
Yeah.
originality will come from someone with those more technical skills than creative skills. And
Right.
if you had told me at 18, 17, 18 that you could type in a whole environment, the stuff that is happening now, I just wouldn't have believed it. I would have
Yeah.
said, that's not possible.
Yeah.
How can you
Yeah.
act? How can you do that?
It's
But
crazy.
yet that very thing is happening. And so the combat is not to say to like, okay, technology is bad, blah, blah, blah. AI shouldn't happen. Of course not. It will happen and it does happen and it serves a great value,
Yeah.
but not in lieu of your originality and who you are. Nobody can do that. And I think the great performers, they're one of a kind. Betty Davis. Who's going to make an AI of Betty Davis? People
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
You know, a great artists.
Well, AI can mimic what's been, like it can mimic the past, really. It has to have seen something already in order
Absolutely, Ben.
to create, but it's not actually creating anything original.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. My point.
Mm,
Absolutely, absolutely, Ben.
mm,
That is so true. And for me, it's alarming.
mm-hmm.
Because I feel like, okay, great. So I'm supposed to base it on a model that already exists. Well,
Mm,
no,
mm-hmm.
no, that's not the point. The
Yeah.
point is to be your own, to be
Yeah.
your own,
Yeah, you can draw inspiration from what's been, from, as you said, like go to an art gallery, read a book. It begins to fill your well so that
and your imagination.
your imagination, so that you can draw from it.
Exactly. And then that feeds you the
Mm,
possibility of subtext. You're
mm-hmm.
doing a scene, but actually, what is that subtext? It could be drifting on a painting. It could feel like, it could feel like the linear line of a beautiful piece of music. That can be your subtext. As
Mm,
opposed to, well, the character is saying this, so now in film, I'm supposed to be thinking this. And
right.
it's all premeditated.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no surprise because I don't believe the camera looks for believability, honesty, being organic, all those buzzwords we hear.
Mm,
I think the camera looks for spontaneity. And
yes.
that's something you cannot fake, man.
Yes. Yeah.
Cannot fake being spontaneous. It's happening or it ain't happening. It's right there or it's not. And so it's to put yourself in a sensitized space of emptying, not building, 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 but emptying, so that that spontaneity, which a truthful spontaneity, can actually happen to you.
Yeah, I mean, I often say to my students, um, yes, we may know, like part of the illusion that we have to create is that we don't know what's going to happen next. When we've read the script, I know what I'm going to say, I know what you're going to say, and we know how the scene's going to end. But what we don't know is how you and I are going to get there this time.
Ex- Exactly, exactly. And that is the journey. That's the fun of it. My
Mm,
God, that's a pure utter joy of it.
yeah,
And what they call playing. That's the
right.
playing. You
That's
just
the
described
playing.
what playing is.
It should almost feel like improv, where in improv, when I walk on stage, I don't know my who, what, why, where, or when. And the first couple of minutes, I'm just trying to figure it out. Once I've got those circumstances, I'm actually free to just play. I'm free
Absolutely.
to just have fun knowing what I now know. And I guess so for an actor, you've already been given the who, what, why, where, and when. You don't even have to think about what to say next. So the whole
Mhm.
thing is improv. The whole thing is play now within the
Absolutely.
confines of those
Mhm.
requirements.
Yes, and then to have the, freedom comes from structure. You can't have freedom
I
without
love
structure.
that.
You can't have
Absolutely.
freedom, cannot have any freedom without staunch structure. But
Mm.
then that's really letting go of all of that, and just having the residue on your palm, and that residue is what dictates you. Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think one of the things that I really love about everything that you've been talking about your work is that it really makes room for the subconscious. It
Absolutely.
makes room for, as I think Jerry Grinnell would call it, the associative function, that all of a sudden you could be in a scene and something reminds you of something. And
Mm-hmm.
you're not trying to control the scene to the extent that there's no room for anything else to happen. There's no room for that subconscious to filter in.
If I ever got down to writing an acting book, which I will do someday when I have a break of
Please
two.
do. Please
Uh,
do, Berg.
the name of the book would be Dreaming Awake.
Mm,
Dreaming Awake, because I think
mm,
that that's it. For me, that's a good description of what it feels like. It's
mm,
being inside a dream, and the dream is happening to you, and you're just
mm.
responding. And then
Right.
and then a multitude of things can happen. You're running down the street, you become an eagle. This happens, this happens, this happens, but you're inside of it, as opposed to sort of watching it, Ben,
Right.
watching it and being objective about what you're seeing. Clear?
Mm,
And so that dreamlike state is really, 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 I think it's what Hamlet the play is about. And I
mm,
think it's also at the core of our experience, to
mm,
be or not to be, to be present or to be away. And that being off equilibrium and trying to find the equilibrium of being awake and dreaming is the very essence of drama. It's the essence of
yeah,
conflict.
that's
It's
it.
being off equilibrium. And then we in film are so excited to watch the artist try to get back to equilibrium, you know? And so I
Yeah.
say, if you want language, stay in the theater. If
Hmm.
you want behavior, nuance, it's film. Which is interesting to me. It's contrary to what anyone tells you about film. Oh, film, don't move. Don't move. It's still, it's completely still. No, that is inactive. Move, but move microscopically, specifically.
Yes, yes. Yes, there's a quote I read by the creator of Japanese No theater who said, "Feel in your heart 10 and express 7."
Love that.
Mm,
Love, I love that. The concept of following your impulses. I don't follow my impulses. Sometimes they're not going to be valuable for me.
hmm.
Sometimes they are, but it's not that simple. It's to have that and then evaluate in the moment. Is that going to win the game? Is that going to win the goal?
Mm, hmm.
It's that second evaluation is what I'm interested in watching the body go through. You know,
Mm,
it's not just about expressing oneself and being free for freedom's sake. It's structure. It's our job is to serve the text,
hmm.
but to illuminate the text as opposed to illustrate the text. Big difference for me. And so when it says this is my choice, it better not be on the page. It's better something that you bring to the page, you know, which is what I'm interested in.
I love that saying of yours, illuminate, not illustrate.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's important to remember,
Mm,
because we feel a responsibility to indicate. And basically, at the end of the day, that's a lot of times what acting becomes. It's just very well crafted, very believable indication. But
hmm
it's an echo. It's not a real voice. It's an echo. It's something I've heard before, you know.
And how can an actor then also navigate the technical requirements of film while also staying open to that
That's a
dreamlike
beautiful
state?
question. I think that you have to have both. It's like August Wilson's play, Two Trains Running. You have to have those two trains run around the track exactly equal.
Mm-hmm.
It's being 100% aware of how the camera is perceiving you.
Mm-hmm.
Helen Mirren says this. She says
Yes.
she's 100% aware of what impact you are, the
Mm,
frame, just like you're
mm,
aware of the frame in theater, and then 100% in terms of like just imagination and just going away,
mm,
so that the technical serves the imagination serves the technical, that
mm-hmm.
you have to have both skills together. So like just as simple as if I am talking to you, I call it the wiggle waggle, where people are talking on film and they're moving around because they're expressing yourself, as opposed to moving in terms of just simply action, which I call move speak. So if I just go, why did you say that?
Mm.
I don't agree. It's very clean. It's very crisp.
So you
No,
move first and then
and
speak.
then stop and then send the action, because
Mm-hmm.
action is sent on a straight line and action is not sent on a wiggle waggle line. So by pausing for that one moment, you spot where the action is going. It's like a golfer walking and going, okay, ball's going exactly over there, spots it, then has the swing, and then has the follow through. I think the same is true for the physical life of something. You have to
Mm,
know where you're sending the action to. Because if you don't, what's happening is you're pontificating on on your emotional state of being or the character state of being, and you're expressing yourself rather than changing a source, you being just one of those sources. I can send an action to the seltzer can,
yep.
you know, and to
Mm-hmm.
change that specifically, and so that you know that you're being task oriented rather than emotion oriented. And so it's to work very technically like that.
Mm-hmm.
I say, turn off the sound in your auditions, turn them off. If you haven't told that story, just watching, you need to redo it again. Or to take a snapshot at the beginning of the audition, a snapshot at the middle, and a snapshot at the end. Put literally a snapshot, put those three snapshots together and put it, lay it in front of you and look at that. If that doesn't tell a story,
We see the journey.
redo it again. Exactly. So that
Mm,
it's motion pictures. You're creating pictures. You're
mm,
creating physical tableaus.
mm-hmm.
Well, that's what a director does. That's what a
Mm,
director does. But it's great when the actor is able to provide that for the director. Garbo.
mm-hmm.
Garbo. At the end of Queen Victoria, she has a shot where she's just looking out at the ocean. She's frozen for about 40 seconds. She doesn't move, and it's devastating.
Mm,
Betty Davis takes, in Now Voyager, she takes a drag of the cigarette. She looks up at the stars and poses, poses, but
mm,
it's not posing. It's creating a tableau that the director goes, well, I mean, look at that. That is creating a picture that I'm going to utilize and I'm going to capitalize and I'm going to use. So I've even asked people to kind of like, and don't take this wrong, but to pose, to go from one position to another, to another, and that creates a tableau with the partner. And then the director is really seeing what you're doing visually, and the editor goes, well, I mean, I don't, they're doing the work for me. they're creating this for me. And so I
And
really,
in a sense, I mean, I love that. I love that idea. That's something that an actor could explore in a rehearsal, correct? That they could
absolutely.
think like a director, so and perhaps practice those three tableaus,
Mm-hmm.
so that they then have the freedom within that structure to move between them and not have to think about it, but just let it happen habitually or automatically.
Right. And in live and scene work, I've said, okay, great. Give me sort of statues, a tableau, the two actors together, of what you feel the beginning of the scene is. Now move to
Mm,
the middle, completely different tableau. Now
mhm.
move to the end, completely different. And then I say the fun of the scene is to try to get from one to the other organically.
Organically,
And
I
then
love
and
that.
then when you're in that, when you're going from one to two and you're into two, you just stop and you as actually freeze and pose that. And it's going, whoa, there's the story. And so
There's a story.
you're thinking and working a film not intellectually, but you're thinking in terms of visual. You've got, I think that we have to retrain ourselves in film. It's taking all the technical and the aesthetics of theater, but then
Yep.
translating it to what works visually,
Mm,
visual
mm,
storytelling. You know, Here's the example. If I may,
please.
a student has a lead in a series, and she was just directed by a very good director. She said, "Oh, just throw it away. Just throw it away. Just throw away the scenes. Throw everything, and don't even look at the partner." And she came to me and she goes, "Berg, it just feels awkward. I just feel like I'm being naturalistic again. There's no choices." And this is a very, very good television director.
Mm,
And so I gave her the task. I said, "What are you afraid?" I asked her, "What are you afraid of?" And
mm,
she said, "I'm afraid of being seen." Actually, it's a very manipulative character. She's very, very, and she said, "If I look at someone, someone is going to actually see me and I'm going
mm,
to appear. I like to disappear." And I said, "That's what you're avoiding." And so when you're looking away, it's not looking away, it's avoiding to actually being actually present and being seen. And
mm.
made the scene extremely active and
Right,
extremely about the partner, even though she never hardly even looked at the partner, you
right.
know.
Yep.
And her dialogue was very monosyllabic. It was really a very, very specific tactic that really helped her, you know. So
What a fantastic choice. And so, I mean, I think sometimes there's a notion that actors feel like they can't. On the one hand, they've got to try to stay open and free in the scene. And so, how can they make a choice? And yet, that's a very specific choice.
I
That
think
it's
so.
that. So, can you maybe just speak to that, finding that balance between that openness and also making these kinds of story choices or character choices?
I got it. It's in the how of the action, Ben, because
Mm,
she's not going to confront the woman because then she's going to appear and she'll be revealed, but it's how she's avoiding. So at one point she could be avoiding by sexuality. Another point she could be avoiding by by the rhythm is being very staccato and very threatening.
mhm.
So it's basically the how of the action, how you're doing something. And that can change shot to shot to
Right.
shot, but you're still doing the same thing. You're still
Like a piece
avoiding.
of blocking, really. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. How are you getting to that
Mm,
source on the
hmm.
tabletop, as we were discussing earlier?
Could you maybe speak to your approach to rehearsals? Because I know, like, how should an actor think about rehearsals? I remember from some of your classes and your boot camp, for example, that sometimes you would encourage us to rehearse an entire scene just to explore one aspect of the scene and then to
Hmm.
go back and explore a completely different aspect. And in a sense, you're beginning to create layers that you can
Hmm.
then draw from when you do the scene. So, how do you think about rehearsals?
The first thing I want to do in a rehearsal, and this is very, 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 very initial, is what does my body feel sitting across from you?
Hmm.
I was in a play once in New York, and it was on the script, it was all happy, happy time, but I felt very uncomfortable sitting across from the actor who was actually playing my father. And it got worse. And I went, going, oh, what's going on here? He's a very lovely man, but what is my thing? And I did not realize it was my body telling me the entire relationship was a lie. And it was not in the script.
Wow.
And I went to the director, I went, is this like not truthful? What they're saying? Is this all fabrication? And the director, being smart, said, well, we'll find out. We'll find out. Indeed it was. Indeed it was. My body knew it just sitting across from the actor. So I say the first step is really don't look at the other actor. This is the character. I'm the character. This is what they're feeling. This is what I'm feeling. It's to literally take in the kinetics, the reality of it. And sometimes that's confusing, but because it doesn't go with the script, it doesn't go with the given line that's on the page. So I must be doing it wrong. I must be doing something wrong, whether your body is always the first thing that knows. But after that, it's to work on one thing at a time, as you were saying. Like if there's a beat in a thing, I ask the actor, first of all, what is the underlying objective for the entire play? Great. Now, and that's a core need. Something simple. Like my underlying objective is I need to work. The purpose of life is to work. I'm like a bad Chekhov character.
You are probably the hardest
worker
working.
bees, not one of the drunks that are like, laying on the parlor complaining. Yeah. I unfortunately am one the worker bee. Anyway,
No
so that's my core thing, which explains everything, which explains why I'm a workaholic, blah, 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 blah. I'm always so busy all the time, blah, blah, blah. So after that, then there's the scenic objective, but then there's the beat objective. And within the beat objective, I say, what is your function? Like, what is your archetype? In that beat, not the scene, just the first beat. What's the rhythm of the beat? What's the objective of the beat? What is the texture of the beat? And so you've got these 4 or 5 different things that you can draw from, but you just try one thing at a time. Okay, I'm going to do this beat and just investigate the function or the archetype, if it were, or the stereotype. Then, or I'm just going to look at the rhythm, or I'm just going to look at the objective, the immediate objective of that beat. And then you've worked your way through one beat, only one beat, 3 or 4 different ways. And then you go, you know what? For this first beat, it's actually rhythm that's the most important thing. It's rhythm. And so you're not deciding what to work on from beat to beat to beat, but you're exploring each possibility that is a subdivision of that one beat, and then going, ooh, this is where function is going to serve me best. This is where rhythm is going to serve me best. This is where the source of the beat, like one woman had where she held up her wedding ring, and the other partner was making advances, and she goes, I'm married. Look, I am married. And that wedding ring was the entire beat. It was the source. The entire beat was that ring on her finger.
Her relationship to that ring.
Absolutely. And so that you begin to work monosyllabically. I'm only doing one thing at a time because I'm a very complicated person. I have to simplify things. I can do one thing. You give me 2 things to do, I get like a dog on a highway. I'm I'm trying to please and do too much. I can do one thing at a time. And then by doing one thing and then having another option and another option, one beat, then I feel like I can weave my way through different beats, utilizing different things, utilizing rhythm, function, objective, source.
It's interesting. I've just been reading a book on sports psychology, and it talks about exactly that the conscious mind can only focus on one thing at a time. It can only have one thought at a time. But by giving it something to focus on, you're also then beginning to allow the subconscious and your habits and your skill to actually also begin to do what it knows how to do. But you've kind of got to get the conscious mind out of the way by giving it a task.
I completely believe that. And you said it, man, giving it a task. giving it a task.
Mm,
So, that's where my expression, what is your imaginative task doing? What
mhm,
is a task that you are doing that's based in imagination,
mm.
based is in something non-linear?
Can you just speak very quickly to, because you mentioned archetype and function, what is your function in the scene? And that was something else I really took away working with you, was the importance of archetype and prototype. Can you maybe
Mm-hmm.
explain what you mean by function and how to explore archetype and prototype in a scene?
Mhm. I think archetype and prototype, I think things are written in archetype and
Mm,
prototype. I I I endorse that. They're written that way. What one must be very careful of is confusing archetype with stereotype.
yes.
Stereotype is not valuable nor appropriate. And
Hmm.
in the last, thank God in the last 5 years, we've really 6, 7 years, we've really rooted out, okay, that's stereotype. That is
Mm,
stereotype. That's not archetype. So first
hmm.
of all, I don't want people to be afraid of the word archetype because I
Mm,
think sometimes, I don't know, but sometimes it couldn't be associated with stereotype. And I do
right.
not stereotype
Yeah.
at all in any way, shape, or form. But the archetype gives you the character because, as you astutely said before, what you do is who you are.
Right.
It's not creating a character, it's a result.
It's how
I
we
do
judge
some
character.
behavior, and then you
Yeah.
associate that with, oh, he's that kind of person or that person.
That's it.
Clear? And
Yep.
so I think that that has to be looked at very, very, very specifically. And your behavior is not random, your behavior is based in need. And
Mm,
so I think that there are core needs that each character has that's going to express itself behaviorally through what archetype they adapt to accomplish the goal. So your
hmm.
archetype is not, okay, here's your archetype, and that's go ahead and do that.
Mm,
No, it's constantly changing that because that's what you do with the objective. You
mm,
know, you're after something very, very specifically. So it's a feeling of being, of morphing, of changing, of being, of not being, okay, this is who I am.
mm,
Again, not identifying.
hmm.
I don't have a need to identify the character so much. I begin to think of it as something
Possibility.
that ebb and flows. Yes, absolutely, Ben. Possibility. And then the most shocking behavior is the most appropriate behavior. And you go,
Mm.
wow, I would never think that that would be appropriate. And yet that's the very thing that's interesting.
And an archetype is a universal form.
I think
It's
so.
something that we all recognize as being universal.
Absolutely.
And
It's in writing.
mm,
It's in writing. It's always been that way.
whereas a prototype is an original form.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, for example, if I was thinking about this character as it reminds me of a prototype, the prototype might be, it kind of reminds me of my next door neighbor or my dad, or,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
now what can I begin to borrow from
Hmm.
them that I might want to explore in this scene?
Absolutely.
Is that how you
Right.
might think about it?
Absolutely. I think that the one is based on a cliche.
Mm,
Okay, great. Like, the New York City bartender. I don't know. It
right.
depends on what section of the city you are in.
Yeah.
And one is taking who you are and extrapolating it and putting it into a character.
Mm,
Like Lucille Ball, I Love Lucy,
hmm.
she was so specific in
Right.
terms of her being Lucy in that given circumstance, which is
Yes.
why she was able to change and create a viable character as opposed to just like, okay, great, I've seen that archetype before,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
you know, and so that's based on who you are and how you
Mm,
express yourself.
very interesting. I guess if there was one gift, one kind of tool or shift that you could really give to every actor listening right now, what would it be? Something that you'd really want them to take away.
That's such a lovely question. I just wish and hope that someone would believe in themselves and really without trying to make believe, but actually really believe that who you are, what you feel, what your proclivities are, what your tastes are, what your desires are,
Mm.
are valid. And so I feel that, I think actors are sort of shy peacocks. Shy peacocks. That's how they strike me. And so eager and willing to give themselves away for some kind of approval,
Right.
you know, because to be in this profession, it's hard. It's
Mm.
hard, and you don't get approval hardly at all in
Mm.
any way, shape, or form. And yet you keep going because you're the artist and you have to keep going. And whatever, however place you are in your career, in your life, to just trust and believe that you are so valid,
Mm.
that you are valid, period, end of sentence. And what you have to say has great merit. And that if you really believe in that in yourself, it's the only thing that's going to make me believe in myself. You give me courage. You give me
Mm.
courage, You give me the chance to kind of breathe air that is mine,
Yes.
you know. And so that's basically what I believe in. The rest can be learned. The rest is just experience,
Mm.
you know.
Yep.
And 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 the other thing I would say is don't look at this short lived.
Mm.
I don't think a dancer does that, or an artist, or a musician, or an athlete. They're going to work. An athlete even goes as long as the body is going.
That's it.
And so, to look at this on a longer lens,
Yeah.
and I honestly do think that that means having a craft. And I
Mm-hmm.
really think that that needs timing
Yes.
and training. And I don't say that because I'm an acting teacher. I say that because it's my own reality.
Yeah.
I've never had the good sense to take a break. No, that was 17. I would know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
I'm around in a circle in my living room talking to myself. And so that's basically is to look at the longer picture and to believe in that longer picture. you
Mm.
know that's really courageous. We are such courageous you know people. Again, to ask permission is to seek denial. You don't have to ask permission from anything.
Mm-mm.
Just do it. Do
Just
what?
do it.
I don't know. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Like, I've asked actors, what would you like? And they said, I want to be a working actor. I want to be a working actor. And my response is, beautiful. Working at what?
Mm.
What would you like to work at?
Mm.
You know? And then you take ownership, because
Mm.
then you have to define it. And if you have to define it, you have to stand behind it, because it's who you are, or you're not,
Mm.
or you're not.
Yeah.
And I don't think that this is a journey for everybody, but I think that the people who are really, really in this for the longevity of it are two things: are curious and they're generous.
Mm.
Curiosity and generosity, I believe, are the only two real prerequisites of it. And the
Mm.
rest is going through the motions and finding it.
Well, Berg, I want to just say a very big thank you to you
Oh,
because
thank you.
you look, you've been a big inspiration and you had a big impact on me as a young actor.
Oh,
And
thank you so
I
much.
would not be the teacher I am or the actor I am for that matter.
Absolutely. Ben, you have really, really become a marvelous, marvelous, marvelous teacher.
Thank you,
You
Berg.
really are changing people's lives. And I really believe that. And for me to be just a part of that process, I really, without any bullshit, it really is extremely humbling. And you will go on and you will pass this on to somebody else, and blah blah blah. And hopefully that other thing you pass it on to is not going to be a fucking AI. Ah!
Exactly. God help us.
God help us. God
That's
help
right.
us. So you know, I so appreciate you saying that. I sincerely do.
You're a real gift. You're a gift to actors, Berg,
Well, thank you.
and your studio is a gift. And I really encourage anyone listening to if you have an opportunity to work with Berg, to jump at it. Go to LA, study with Berg. You will not regret it. There's no one else out there doing quite what you do. And
And coming right back at you, coming right back at you. I refer very few people because I want them to be really taken care of. And you're like a first on that list, man. You know,
thank you, Berg.
I appreciate it. All right.
Well, look, we'll do this again sometime
Please,
soon,
please.
I
I love
hope.
it. I
Yeah.
love it. I love it.
Yeah. Thank you
All right.
so much, Berg.
Thank you. Thank you very much.